Hey guys, this is Levi with Berkshire Biking Board, and today we're going to talk about how to alleviate disc brake rubbing. The process is going to be the same for the front or back brake, and really the only tools that you will need is either a 5mm Allen key, 4mm, or a T25. Some of these brakes, the bolt will be on the top right here where you can see from the caliper, as opposed to this rear brake, the bolts are going to be underneath right here. Process will be the same regardless. The biggest sign of needing to make these adjustments would be you can hear the brake rubbing. It can be quite annoying, especially if you're out on a ride. Every time that wheel rolls around, you just hear a tisk, 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 tisk. What we need to do first is get the bike off the ground, and I'm just visually looking inside of the caliper. I can see the pads on both sides of the rotor, and I can see the rotor in the middle. So if I spin this wheel, I can see this bike, the rotor is spinning nice and straight, and there's an equal gap between the pads. So this one's actually fine, but for the purpose of the video, we will bring it out of adjustment and back into adjustment. Caliper is held onto the fork with these two bolts right here. So when I loosen these up just a little bit, maybe a turn or two until we can get some movement back and forth, I can then take this entire caliper and I can move it side to side here, which will affect that pad gap. There is a quick and dirty trick. A lot of times it will take care of it, but it's not necessarily the silver bullet if you're really having some issues, and it's quite simple. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna squeeze this front brake nice and firm. You're gonna take your Allen key and you're gonna tighten these bolts. So what I have found is that if you go back and forth while tightening them, it tends to move the caliper a little bit less. If you just tighten one all the way, it kind of creates some leverage that'll twist the caliper a little bit. So you can see here, I'm just going back and forth a couple times until they're nice and snug. This whole time I have remained squeezing this brake lever, and now that they're tight, I can loosen it and I can spin the wheel. And on this bike, everything's nice and new and working well, so that did take care of it. Sometimes you'll need to try that once or twice. It can take care of your issue nice and quickly, and sometimes that's all that you need to do. If that's not working for you, keep watching, we'll go through the whole process. So I'm visually trying to inspect the rotor, and it can be a little tough to see in there. We have pad on one side, rotor in the middle, pad on the other. And just to gain a little contrast and make it a little bit easier to see, if you have a piece of paper or a white rag, if you just hang this behind the rotor, all of a sudden everything's a lot easier to see. You can also take this rag and just put it on the ground, and that way when I look down through the caliper, I can see all the gaps that I'm talking about in this video. So if the trick of holding the brake and tightening everything down didn't work, there is a more in-depth process. This is kind of like a caliper reset. Sometimes you'll have to do this if it's not working in the first place. I'm gonna walk you guys through it, and we'll start here. So first we do have to take the wheel out. Wheel comes out. Next we're gonna have to take the pads out. A retaining clip, pad retaining bolt. Okay. And once I have the pads out, I'm going to take my tire lever. I sprayed this down with rubbing alcohol just to make sure I'm not introducing any contaminants to the system. I'm going to go in there, retract the pistons. Okay, they're all the way back in. Pads are going to go back in.
Just tripping on day dreams, got dirty little lullabies playing. Might as well just ride around the nursery and couch.
Retaining clip back on. And I'm sure you guys have seen one of these before. A lot of times this is used as a spacer when you're traveling so that you don't have to worry about the brakes compressing, but actually this has another purpose, and that is to center the pads. What can happen is one pad can push out of the caliper further than the other, and then that gap, instead of it being in the middle of the caliper, is offset to one side. So when I put this inside of the caliper, clips into place, I now squeeze the brakes a couple times, and once it's nice and firm, that just ensures that both pads have come out evenly. I'm gonna remove this clip and get the wheel back in there. And again, I'm gonna loosen these caliper bolts. And now when I look down into the caliper, I can see a pad on one side, a rotor in the middle, and a pad on the other. And what we're really looking for is just a little bit of daylight on each side of the pad. And the way that I'm gonna do that is just by pushing this caliper back and forth while it's still loose. And I'm gonna get it as close as I can. And then I'm gonna just lightly tighten these down, just finger tight. So now I can still move this caliper, but there's a little bit of friction so it stays in place where I want the caliper to be. And just visually in there, I got daylight on both sides, so I'm just gonna tighten it down. And I got a little rub, so I missed it. And this is just a little bit of trial and error back and forth until you get it centered just right. And again, just tightening these side by side just a little bit. And as you can see now, we got a free spinning wheel. No rub, no noise. Thanks for tuning in, guys. These videos are always fun to make. If you guys have a chance to like and subscribe, it always allows us the chance to make more of these, which I would love to do. And hopefully we'll see you back here soon.